thing more I wanted to show you before we go to Kerberos. When I'm saying this Hadoop is not secure, so let me exit out of here. Let me say user add Aman. Okay, already just okay. su hyphen Aman, right? Hadoop fs hyphen ls, right? I'm doing something. So let's see, do I have a file here? Vi test file. This is test file. Hadoop fs hyphen put test file on SDFS. Common user is trying to put that. See the message? I do not have permission. Why? Because that SDFS system by default is owned by SDFS user and a group Hadoop. So I should be either the member of that Hadoop group, or I should be having a permission on a particular directory, right? So I change more. I can create a directory. Let's say some directory called /home Aman, and I can give change ownership of that to Aman. But we are talking about how we can bypass security in this case, right? So one thing is, it is just checking for this simple command, and if you do SDFS groups, it will show you what groups it is checking, right? Okay, before coming to Kerberos, so what it will do is, how I can bypass, what do you think, how we can bypass this? So I should not be doing any ownership change. Like, I shouldn't be coming out and logging in as an SDFS user, then creating. That's the right way of doing. Like, you can create a directory, give the ownership to Aman user, and Aman can read right into that directory. But now in this case, when Aman is trying to write something, it's not giving him a permission. So what he can do? Can he do something to bypass this security? What do you think, guys? Can it bypass this user check somehow? Okay, how we can bypass that user check? Nilesh is saying yes, we can do. How we can bypass that user check? Right, so by default, let's say in a cluster in your organization and anywhere, PAM, yes, you can do a PAM mapping, but for that PAM mapping, you will need a root permission to your base system, right? Here, like, let's say I'm an Aman user, I cannot go and modify anything in the PAM, etc, PAMD and all those mapping without having a root privileges. But I'm logged in as an Aman user, right? So simple thing I can do is, I can fool Hadoop, because Hadoop is just checking for ID -gn, and it is checking for from an environment variable called Hadoop _user _name. That's all it is checking from. I can do this command here, right? And now let's try putting the file. It has allowed me. See, now it has not given me message. I can just show you this, right? So I can even impersonate that user without doing anything. No root admin access, no SDFS privilege access, but I can bypass it by just doing this command: exporting Hadoop user _name is equal to any user. So it will bypass it. So by default, that's why we say this statement: by default, Hadoop is not secure. It's not secure by default. I can impersonate it as any user. So whatever we have done till now in security, let's say SSL or what kind of an encryption, whatever, I can still become any user I want in the cluster unless we have a Kerberos enabled. So we have seen this. So now we have seen the importance of why we need something beyond the default security. So we have a protocol called Kerberos. So what is a Kerberos? Kerberos is an authentication protocol, right? It's a network authentication protocol. So what it does, it uses tickets to authenticate, and the passwords are never stored locally or sent over the wire. So you will only get a token. You will use that token to go to each node in the cluster, right? Okay, so this is again quite a detailed discussion, but I will tell you what are the main things it does, right? So okay, let me just go to, yeah, let me just go to part. I will keep this slide here. Let me just open another one, right? So let me explain you from here. So important thing to keep in mind, it is for authentication, not for authorization. It is using tickets to authenticate. Passwords are never stored locally or sent over the wire. It uses symmetric key cryptography. So we will be looking at all this. We will be looking at Kerberos configuration. We will be looking Kerberos in Hadoop in two ways. When SASL is enabled means when the security is enabled, right? What we have seen till now, we have enabled SSL and all those in our previous class. So one is that mode where SSL and is enabled everything, then we enable Kerberos. And another is when you don't have those SSL, SASL and all those enabled, and then you enable Kerberos, right? So both are different two ways of doing Kerberos in a cluster. So both has a different way of configuring. So I will show you what is the difference and what does it mean non-secure data node in that one. So non-secured here it means when we are enabling SSL between data nodes, we are encrypting all the communication channel, we are encrypting the data. So that's why we are saying secured communication, secure data node. But I can also use non-secure data node, means to configure Kerberos in a cluster. The previous step which we have done, like SSL enable and all those, is not mandatory, right? I can bypass that and I can run Hadoop Kerberos on a non-secure data node. So before we start, so these are the important prerequisites we must meet, right? Must meet means if we don't meet this, our Kerberos will fail. All right, Kerberos authentication will fail. First important thing is NTP must be working, means all nodes in the cluster must have the same time, right? The delta could be 2 minutes or something, but it should have the same time. It should not be that each node is showing you a different time. So let me just pull this window up here. So let's check the time first, right? So same thing, I do all here and I'm seeing date. See, all machines are having the same time. If not, make sure they have the same time. How? You start the NTP service on each node, right? So I can say service NTPD restart on each node. By default, each of your CentOS machine will be configured, or Red Hat machine, right? Whichever you use, CentOS machine will be configured to talk to some global NTP servers, right? As long as you are able to reach the internet. So by default, when you install NTP, yum install NTP and start that service, it will automatically sync to default public NTP servers. So first thing is it must be the same time. If the time is not same, it will not work. Another thing is every system must have the right entropy. So if you're a Windows user, you might have noticed that if you do some kind of a SSL SSH keygen operation on a Windows machine using that putty keygen and all that, so it you might have noticed it says you, okay, not enough entropy, move your mouse, do some activity and all, right? So entropy is the randomness, right? So your system must have a right randomness. So it should be at least 1000. So how you know what is the randomness? Cat slash proxys slash kernel entropy. Let me just check. History pipe grep entropy. Yeah, it's here. Right, and this part. Right. So by default, your entropy will be very less. It will be around 200 or something, but it should be minimum 1000, right? So if I do a cat on this path in the operating system, prox is kernel random entropy available. Entropy means the randomness available. So it will be showing you a value of few hundred, 200, 300, 400, and this will keep on decreasing as you are doing any kind of a secure operation. Let's say you might be doing an SSL, right? You might be doing key generation and all. When it works, it consumes that entropy and it will keep on going low. So entropy should be minimum 1000. So how we do that? So we do that entropy by using RNG, random number generator, right? So each node in the cluster must have a random number generator. Means yum install random number generator hyphen tools. You need to install this, right? Okay, it's already installed in my nodes because these nodes would be used for many times for a lot of things. So I would have set that, but in your default case, it will not be installed. So see, I am not just saying anything but just like that. So I can show you here all these steps which will be covering. It's giving in the GitHub. I've given it. So let's say you want to install these tools. I've given you this command here, right? Then you say ntp install ntp, all these services start, right? So I've given these all these options here. Kerberos install also I have told you how to do. This is all I will be telling you only from the GitHub which we have, right? So nothing special here, right? So I will be just using the GitHub. So now let's go back to the prerequisites. Another important thing is, if my entropy is very low, whenever I'm doing, let's say, SSH keygen, or I'm trying to do an activity in Kerberos, which is a principal creation, which we will see what is a principal, it will take very long time for it to create. It will be very slow process, right? So it will not work. It will take very long time. So another thing which we need to do is, we need to patch Java with unrestricted key length, right? We need to patch Java with an unrestricted key length. What does it mean, right? So by default, let's say I have installed Java from Java RPM, right? JDK 8 RPM. So let's say user Java. If I go here, Java, you can see my default Java, right? We did yum install JDK. It installed that. But what you have to do is, we have to download a unrestricted version of Java key length. So what does this mean, right? When I say unrestricted key length, so what happens is, I can reduce the key length. Key length means, let's say my encryption key could be, I can say, okay, let's make it 96 or 128 bits. So it will not be mandatory to have a patched Java. But if I say, let's say 256 bits of encryption key, so Java will not be able to work. Default JDK will not work. Either I have to go with OpenJDK, right, which is having an unrestricted key length, or I have to patch it. So how will I patch it? I will go to Google, and what I will do, I will search for JCE 8 Linux, Java cryptography extension for Linux. So whichever JDK version I'm let's say I'm using 8 or 9, whatever you have. So we'll use that, and I will go for that. I will click here. It will take me to a page. I will say accept, and I can click here and download that. Right? Click here and download that. So I think I have already downloaded that already. So I will show you what that file contains. So let me see, do we have JC here? Yeah. So right, so this is what I have downloaded here. Right, so what this file actually contains, let me unzip you and show it. Right, so I'm doing an unzip on this, or let me just copy this to somewhere into temp. Right, and I go to cd/temp, and I say unzip, and I say JCE. Right, so it will untar what? It will create a directory unlimited JCE policy JDK8. Right, it will create a directory like this. It will have two jars in that: local policy jar and the US export policy jar. Right, it will have two jars: local policy jar and export jar. So what I have to do, I have to copy these jars into, what I have to do, I will do cp unlimited local this jar into user Java, doesn't matter, latest, default, whichever, wherever you go, because that's a sibling to each other. Default, in default I will go to lib, sorry, default JRE lib security, right here, this path. Right, by default it will have US export and local jar, which will be restricted key length ones. So I will download these and replace this local.jar and export.jar with the old ones. Right, so let me just show you the path here. Right, see, this one will be the old ones. What we will do, we will replace it with the new ones on each node. Right, so what I will do, so I have like all these commands written with me. So I will take this one, and I will, let's say, I will say cat patch. Right, so this is what I'm doing. See, patch, what it is doing, it is copying local policy and US policy jar on all nodes in the cluster, at this destination path, right? In this destination path. So I'm saying patch. So it's just copying that. So now Kerberos will work at 256 encryption, which is by default the encryption which Kerberos uses for its key length principle and all that. So we will not have any issues. So now we have fixed this prerequisites as well. So another thing which I will tell you when we go to this step. So we are using our previous lab where we have enabled SSL and everything, and we are going to enable Kerberos. But as I said, that is not mandatory. So if we are not following the previous step, right, SSL and SAASL enabled, then I have to do one extra step in which I have to set JSVC_home, right? So I will show you that what does it mean a little bit later. So in Kerberos, what we have principles. So what principles are? Simply, principles can be of three types: user principle, host principle, service principle. So principle is in a simple term, you can say it's a identity of a user or a host or a service. So let's say I want to create a principle for Aman, means I want to create an Aman user in Kerberos. So it will be look like this: Aman at this domain name, right? So this domain name in Kerberos is called realm. It will be in capital letters. So how we have in Windows also realm. So let's say my domain is netzilon.com or cluster1.com, doesn't matter, it has to be the same. And my Kerberos realm is, let's say, netzilon.com. So host will be like this. So when I write host/_host, what does it mean? This variable will be automatically replaced with the host name, right? Because in my cluster I may have 1000 nodes. So I will not be saying host slash that particular host name into this on each config file, right? Let's say in core-site or hdfs-site, we have to put these configurations where we'll be saying host slash a particular host name at a domain is something, is the some user or some host principle, let's say. So I cannot create for each host separately. Let's say 1000 nodes, it will be very cumbersome. So we have a special kind of a replacement variable, _host. So it will automatically replace with the host name. Similarly, I can have a service principle, like let's say http/_host, I can have a service principle. Then we have key tabs. So we have two things: principles and key tabs. Principles are basically user identity, host identity, or a service identity. Key tabs are service key tabs or headless key tabs. So what does headless and service key tabs means? So let's say I have a user Aman. I'm trying to connect to Kerberos as Aman user. It will prompt me for a password. I can interactively add my password, correct? But it's not mandatory. I can give my password from a special file which is called a key tab file, like how you have let's say in Linux you might have done an unintended installation by using Anaconda and all that. So it's way of supplying answers, right? So I can supply Kerberos key tab file, and instead of entering password like on the command prompt, it will read that secret from that key tab and enter it. So there are two types of key tabs: service key tabs and headless key tabs. Headless key tabs are this format: headless. Headless means they are not associated with any host. If you look into this service and host principles, they are associated with a host, particular host. But this particular user will not be associated with any host. So that's why they are called headless users. right? So it could be your service user, let's say STFS, Yarn, Mapper, right? All those users, or Hive user, whatever user. So these will be all your headless users. So I can create key tabs for headless users or service key tabs. So we have two types of key tabs. So we have certain useful commands which we will do today. Like I can have KDB5 util, which is your Kerberos database utility, right? Kerberos, when we configure a Kerberos server, it will have maintain its entries like details about principals, it's all keys and all into a special database. I can create or manipulate or initialize that database by using that command. Kinit is the command to initiate or get a token, initiate a token, to list a token klist. Ktutil is to read or play with the key tab files. Ktadd is to add a key tab. So if when we are configuring Kerberos, it might get very cumbersome. Or can we check jar is restricted or not? No, we cannot check by default. So what will happen is, let's say if you run Kerberos without patching the Java jar, it will give you an error like invalid key length, right? It will give you a message called invalid key length. So by default, it is not patched, right? It will not be patched. So these are the options we can enable to debug Kerberos if we have facing any kind of a problem, right? So things to check: NTP, DNS is also mandatory. I have not mentioned that because we have configured DNS always, and I have said DNS is a very important thing. You should have forward and reverse lookup enabled. DNS is working, your NTP is working. So let's say if your time differs between two nodes by more than 5 minutes, which is by default Kerberos time, if it varies more than 5 minutes, it will give you an error call in the log saying clock skew too great, right? So let's say if my Kerberos server time is 9 a.m. and my clients are connecting at, let's say, 8:55 or 4 or something like, right? Or 9:05 after that, Kerberos ticket will not be given to them, right? So they must sync in time within that time. It should be within that. So Kerberos configuration file is etc krb5.conf, which I will show you. So let's say you might run into this. This is the one which I'm talking about. You enable debug log. Let's say you get into some problems. First, check your host names are correct. FQD and DNS is working. NTP is working. Your configuration file is correct. Your principal names are correct. JC is and patched. Java is patched. Else look into the logs. Right. So let's look into our installation and demo of Kerberos. Right. Second will be with SASL. First one we are doing, or other way, it doesn't matter, we can do. So we are looking into, first we are looking into KDC installation and configuration. Then we will look into Kerberos with SASL enabled because we are carrying forward from the last practical. Then we will be doing